Hey, future billionaires, welcome back to the deep dive. You ready to dive into some Uber stock?
Always ready for some Uber talk.
Yeah, we got Uber's Q3 2024 report in front of us here,
Yeah.
and some really interesting analyst opinions on it as well. So by the end of this deep dive, we really hope that you will have all the info you need to decide if Uber is the right stock to add to your portfolio or not.
And you know what's really grabbing my attention right off the bat is this massive milestone they hit this quarter. Uber achieved over $1 billion in GAAP operating income for the first time ever.
Roll. Okay, $1 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something worth taking a closer look at. But before we get too excited,
Right.
could you break down like what GAAP operating income actually means? For those of us who aren't financial wizards.
Absolutely, yeah. So GAAP stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. It's basically the standard set of rules that companies use to report their financial performance. So when we talk about operating income under GAAP, we're talking about the profit that Uber's making from its main business activities, things like the ride-hailing and the food delivery. And this is after they've deducted all the necessary expenses, like salaries and marketing costs, all that stuff.
Gotcha. So it's a good indicator of how efficient their core business is running.
Hmm.
And $1 billion. That definitely suggests they're doing something right.
Absolutely, it's a strong sign.
So to fully grasp this success story, though, it's important to understand Uber's overall business model, right? I mean, they've evolved way beyond just those black cars and ride hailing.
Right, exactly. They've diversified.
So let's break it down. What are the main segments they're operating in now?
Okay, so we've got three main segments to consider. First, there's mobility, their classic ride-hailing service that everyone knows. Then there's delivery, which includes things like Uber Eats. They're even doing groceries now. And last but not least, we have freight, which basically connects cargo carriers with shippers.
Yeah, so they're really spreading their wings, not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Mm.
And that diversification, that must be a good sign for investors, right?
It definitely can be, spreading the risk.
So let's dive into the numbers a bit.
Okay, sounds good.
The Q3 report shows some pretty impressive growth across the board.
It does.
Their gross bookings, which is like the total value of all their rides and deliveries, that's up 20% compared to last year.
Yeah, 20% growth in gross bookings. And remember, that's even after taking currency fluctuations into account. So it shows strong global demand for Uber services across the board.
That's huge. 20%, that's a pretty significant jump. And there's another highlight that the report really emphasized. Their Uber One membership program. It's exploded to over 25 million members. That's like a 70% increase year over year.
Yeah, 70% growth year over year.
That's incredible. And Uber One, it gives users those perks, free deliveries, discounts on rides. So the surge in membership, it's telling us that people are really seeing value in that subscription model.
Yeah, they're getting hooked on the benefits. And for you as an investor, that translates to more predictable revenue for Uber and potentially higher profits in the long run.
So they're not just growing, they're growing smart. But, every business has its challenges. What are some of the headwinds that Uber's facing right now?
Well, the ride-hailing and delivery markets, they're getting really crowded, lots of competition.
Right.
You've got companies like Lyft and DoorDash all vying for market share. In fact, DoorDash actually teamed up with Lyft recently, which could pose a direct challenge to Uber's dominance.
Interesting. Partnerships and competition. A classic dance in the business world.
Sure.
But there's another player we can't ignore, right? Tesla. They're jumping into the autonomous ride-hailing game,
Yeah.
and that could potentially shake things up big time.
Yeah, Tesla, that's a wild card for sure. They've got the technology, the brand recognition, and of course Elon Musk's ambition behind them.
Yeah, can't forget about that.
If they can actually successfully roll out a fleet of those self-driving robo-taxis, it could really disrupt the entire ride-hailing industry.
Yeah, it'd be a whole new ball game. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie,
Yeah.
but it's happening right now. It is. But wait a minute, didn't Uber mention something about their own autonomous vehicle partnerships in the report as well?
They did, yeah, and that's where things get really interesting. Uber's taking a two-pronged approach. On one hand, they're developing their own self-driving technology, but they're also partnering with some big players in the autonomous vehicle space. Companies like Waymo.
So they're heading their bets. Smart move.
Very smart.
But how do these partnerships actually work in practice?
It's a collaboration, essentially. Uber brings their expertise in ride-hailing logistics to the table. They have this massive network of riders and that powerful app platform. And their partners, like Waymo, they contribute their cutting-edge self-driving technology and their vehicle fleets.
It's a match made in Silicon Valley heaven.
It really is.
So what are we seeing in terms of early results from these partnerships?
Well, their collaboration with Waymo is showing some promising early signs. They've been running a pilot program in Phoenix, and the rider feedback has been positive. People are enjoying the experience of riding in a self-driving car, hailing it through the Uber app.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And they're even planning to expand this partnership to Austin and Atlanta next year.
Wow, so the self-driving future might be closer than we think.
It's coming.
But let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. Uber still has to deal with the here and now, right? Those human drivers. And things like rising insurance costs.
Absolutely, that's a big challenge. One of the things they're facing is rising commercial insurance costs. And to address this, they've decided to pass those costs along to consumers,
Okay.
which has led to a slight slowdown in transaction growth, but it was within their expectations, so it's not a major red flag.
So they're managing those costs strategically. But what about the bigger picture, the economies as a whole? There's a lot of talk about a potential recession. Is Uber prepared to weather that storm?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's impossible to predict the future with 100% certainty, but Uber's Q4 guidance is actually quite optimistic. They're anticipating continued strong growth, especially in their most profitable market, the U.S.
That's encouraging. Sounds like they're feeling confident about navigating those potential economic bumps. But let's zero in on the U.S. market for a second.
Oh, good.
With so many people working remotely these days, are there even enough people hailing Ubers to fuel that growth?
That's a good point, and it's interesting because despite the rise of remote work, Uber is actually seeing strong demand in the U.S., particularly for weekday rides, which suggests that people are returning to offices and going back to those pre-pandemic commuting patterns.
So the death of the office commute might have been greatly exaggerated.
Yeah, it seems that way.
But Uber's not just relying on those office workers, are they? They've got other things going on as well.
Exactly. They're constantly innovating
Yeah.
and expanding their offerings to attract new users. For example, they've launched Uber Teens, a service that allows parents to book rides for their teenagers. And they're also experimenting with things like shuttle services, so they're not just sitting back and waiting for the rides to come to them.
They're hustling. That's good to hear. It sounds like they're covering all their bases. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about what the Wall Street analysts are saying about all this. Are they generally bullish on Uber's future?
Well, the analyst community is always a mixed bag, you know? Some are super optimistic, pointing to Uber's strong financials, their innovative spirit, and their potential to really dominate the future of transportation. But others are more cautious. They cite the intense competition, the regulatory hurdles, and the uncertainty surrounding the autonomous vehicle market.
So no clear consensus. It seems like investors really need to do their homework.
Absolutely.
But there was one analyst report you mentioned earlier that really caught my eye. This analyst gave Uber a buy rating and projected their fair value to be almost $79 per share. That's significantly higher than where it's currently trading.
Yeah, almost $80.
Are they seeing something that the other analysts are missing?
What's interesting about this analyst's take is that they believe Uber is essentially transitioning into a software company.
Interesting.
They argue that Uber's true value lies not just in their cars and drivers, but in their platform, their data, their algorithms.
So it's not just about moving people from point A to point B anymore. It's about the technology that makes it all happen.
That's exactly it. They see Uber's platform as this key to unlocking new revenue streams, like their advertising business, which is growing rapidly.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Their advertising business is seeing nearly 80% year-over-year growth. That's huge.
Yeah, almost 80%.
So this analyst, they're thinking long-term, beyond just ride-hailing and deliveries.
That's right.
That makes sense.
Okay.
But let's not forget about the risks. Every investment has a downside, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that could potentially derail Uber's success story?
Well, the competitive landscape is a major factor. For
Yeah.
example, DoorDash partnering with Lyft to create this more comprehensive transportation and delivery ecosystem.
Right.
That could definitely put pressure on Uber's market share.
Right, and then there's that whole wild card of autonomous vehicles. If Tesla manages to pull off their robotaxi vision, that could be a game changer for the entire industry.
It could, absolutely.
And on top of those competitive threats, there are always the regulatory challenges to consider.
Right. Governments around the world are still figuring out how to regulate ride-hailing and autonomous vehicles. And those regulations could impact Uber's ability to operate and expand in certain markets.
So there are a lot of potential pitfalls along the road. It's a complex picture with no easy answers. So what should our listeners, those savvy investors tuning in, what should they be thinking about as they weigh all this information?
It's a good question. We've given them a lot to digest here today. Investing in Uber is not for the faint of heart. It's a high-stakes game
Right.
with the potential for big rewards, but also significant risks.
Yeah, a classic case of high risk, high reward.
Exactly.
So it sounds like doing your due diligence is absolutely crucial here. Don't just jump in because of a catchy headline or a single analyst optimistic prediction.
Right. Don't just follow the hype. You really got to dig deeper. Look at the financials, understand the competitive landscape, and weigh those potential risks against the possible rewards.
Informed decision making, that's key. We've thrown a lot of information at our listeners today. Record profits, ambitious expansion plans, fierce competition, the rise of autonomous vehicles, and even a potential recession looming on the horizon. It's a lot to process.
It is. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But that's the reality of investing in a company like Uber. It's dynamic, it's rapidly evolving, there are no simple answers, no guarantees.
Right.
But by understanding the complexities, the opportunities, the challenges, investors can make more informed decisions and potentially position themselves for success.
Well said. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious, from your perspective, what makes you optimistic about Uber's future? What are the key factors that give you confidence in their long-term growth potential?
Well, what I find most compelling about Uber is their relentless pursuit of innovation. They're not just content with their current market share, they're actively exploring new opportunities, investing in cutting-edge technologies, and forming those strategic partnerships to stay ahead of the curve.
They're not standing still.
Not at all.
And that's important in an industry like this, right?
Absolutely. It's essential.
So what are some concrete examples of this innovation in action?
Well, take their expansion into less dense markets, for example. They're recognizing that the need for convenient and affordable transportation, it's not just limited to big cities.
Like people in suburbs and smaller towns,
Yeah.
they want that seamless ride-hailing experience too.
Exactly. They want those on-demand services as well.
It's about expanding the pie, not just fighting over the same slice.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
And they're not afraid to experiment, are they?
Not at all.
Like with new products like Uber Teens.
Great. Uber Teens.
Or diving headfirst into the uncharted waters of autonomous vehicles.
It's bold.
That willingness to adapt and evolve, it's crucial in a fast-paced industry like this.
It's essential for survival, really.
It's like they're constantly pushing the boundaries,
Yeah.
redefining what's possible. It's been a wild ride with Uber so far, and it seems like the journey's only going to get more exciting.
Oh, absolutely. The next chapter is going to be fascinating.
So as we look ahead, what are the key things investors should be keeping an eye on? What are the big questions that will determine Uber's fate?
Well, while the financial data paints a promising picture, the broader trends in transportation and technology are really going to shape Uber's long-term success. Will they successfully navigate the rise of autonomous vehicles? Will they maintain their competitive edge? In that increasingly crowded market, the next few years are going to be crucial.
So it's a bit of a wait-and-see situation.
In a way.
But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a fascinating story to watch unfold.
It will be. There's no doubt about that. It really is a captivating saga, isn't it? This whole Uber story, innovation, disruption, ambition.
And we'll be here on the deep dive every step of the way, breaking it all down, helping you make sense of it all.
So buckle up, folks. This ride's just getting started.
Haha, nice one. And hey, if you're enjoying these deep dives and you want to stay ahead of the curve in the world of investing, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that bell icon so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. We've got some amazing deep dives coming up, covering everything from AI to the metaverse and beyond. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy investing, happy